One of the first games Sony showed off for the PlayStation 3 was MotorStorm. It was a kind of off-road racer that's basically designed to be a sort of visual showpiece for the system. And now, years later, after it first debuted at E3, that's pretty much exactly what the game is. Up to this point, it is one of the most fantastic-looking games for the system, but it also happens to be extremely light on features and doesn't offer a whole lot beyond basic single-player mode and online multiplayer. The whole premise of MotorStorm is that it's sort of a rallycross meets Burning Man in the post-apocalypse kind of vibe. And that vibe is well represented by the absolutely fantastic visuals in the game. The cars are immensely detailed. They're really broken down, kind of messed up looking cars, but like an extreme amount of detail has gone into all the little messed up features. You can drive everything from like a dune buggy to a big rig to a motorcycle, and everything sort of moves and animates exactly as you would expect a car of that size to move in the game. The physics are great, the track designs are fantastic. The tracks all deform in some really spectacular ways, like as you're sort of just driving through the various valleys of the tracks, there's these mud pits down there, and as you drive through them, your tires, like over time, will just make the mud pits deeper and deeper. You'll see the treads get a little bit more messed up as time goes on. And then there's also just like, signs and pieces of scenery and like burnout husks of cars that you can just kind of wreck into and move around and sort of mess up other people as they're driving around. And of course, you can just drive into other cars and make them explode as you go by. So you get access to all these different types of cars when you're racing in MotorStorm, and the way the game kind of balances this out is that certain cars are better over certain terrain than others. So if you're driving a big rig, you want to stick to the lower ground, kind of drive through the mud pits, you can just handle the straightaways, maybe not so good around the turns. But if you're driving a motorcycle, if you try to drive through the mud pits, you're probably just going to get bopped around by the big rigs a whole lot. So these little upper paths, you can kind of branch through and take these jumps, tighter turns around, cliffs and corners and whatever. And basically that's the balancing act of the game, is that you have to find the right path for your type of vehicle and not basically get destroyed by all the other cars that are out there if you're riding a smaller ride. It's a neat balance, and it actually works pretty well for the most part. There are a couple of cars that are maybe a little bit boring to drive. The big rigs are not the most exciting thing in the world. But overall, the way you can kind of mess with other people as you drive, like even when you're driving a bike or an ATV, you can just drive up to another guy on a bike or an ATV and just swipe at him and knock him off his car. When you're driving a dune buggy or a truck or something, you can just knock the guys on the bikes or ATVs off, to the side and cause them just to wreck horribly. And the crashes really do look spectacular. You see tons of pieces of the car just go flying off. And even when you don't wreck entirely, like the tires will just kind of, bend or, look like they're about to fly off. Pieces of the car will just go all over the place. It looks rad when you break stuff. As cool as the racing is, the main problem with MotorStorm is that there just isn't a lot of ways to sort of explore and experience all the different races. The single player mode is practically just a training mode for the online. All you do is unlock a series of races that are all totally predetermined: what time of day it is, what track it is, what cars you can drive on them, and that's it. It's all, over time the difficulty kind of ramps up as you unlock more and more, and that eventually just gets really sadistic. But that's it. That's all there is to the single-player mode altogether. On top of that, there's only 8 tracks in the game. And while they're long tracks, some of which take upwards of 9 or 10 minutes to finish a 3-lap race, there's 8 tracks in the game. And, you pretty much see all 8 tracks maybe an hour or 2 into the game at most. The good news, at least, is that the game does have online multiplayer, and MotorStorm is a much more fun game to play online than it is offline. When you create a match online, you can actually configure a lot of the stuff you can't configure offline. You can play as any of the available cars, you can set the day and night cycles, pick your tracks, you can even decide whether catch-up assist is on or not. It's got a good ranking system, it's got a good lobby system, it's easy to play, and it's a lot of fun. It's got voice chat, you can talk smack to people as you knock them off cliffs and whatever. It's exactly pretty much what you would want from an online experience with MotorStorm. Trouble is, there's no offline multiplayer at all, so if you want to just play with dudes that are sitting next to you, you kind of can't. In a lot of ways, MotorStorm feels like a game that had much more grandiose ideas at one time or another, and then just kind of didn't get them all in before it came out. The racing itself is good enough and tight enough that, you know, it carries the game along as well as it can, and the online is a lot of fun to play. All that said, MotorStorm is still a very fun racer, and if you already own a PS3, it's clearly one of the games you should be getting for the system.